rest of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's November 10th. This is the high school space needs task force meeting. We'll start off with an update on the request for services that we sent out for a enrollment projection. And this is the second effort to send out this enrollment projection. It went out just after the last meeting, and we got 4 responses, which is one more than last time. As in the last time, the 3 companies, NASDAQ, MAPIC, WXY, all responded, and the 4th company was a company out of Ohio called DeJong Richter, which does a lot of enrollment studies. They've done them in the east, in the northeast, but they are primarily in the Midwest. Nonetheless, it was a very interesting, for comparison purposes, RFP proposal that they put. These have been distributed to myself and Mark and Bill Cleary. We had a follow-up phone call with the companies, answered some more questions. We're getting some more information from a couple of the companies, and we'll certainly be able to make some kind of recommendation at the next meeting. So we're very close to making a decision on that and being able to do a side-by-side comparisons for everybody's benefit.
Great.
I don't know if anybody has any questions. No? Okay. So moving on from the request for services, we will go on to future space needs related to upcoming curriculum changes. And this is an item for Perry Graham and Michael Wood. The origin of this is we realized months ago that in addition to worrying about how many students we had in the schools, we realized that the kind of classes that we were teaching could affect the amount of space that was needed, in that some classes that needed specialized space that would basically be cannibalizing the general purpose space, and we needed to understand what is happening or what's going to be happening in the curriculum that would affect, that would require additional specialized spaces in the high school. So with that, I'll turn it over to Perry and Michael.
So I don't have a handout for this, but Michael and I talked through a couple of different things that we could see in the future. So a television studio / sort of journalism space. We currently use a space that's jury-rigged for that, but something that's more professional, that's designed for that space. That's certainly something we've seen our journalism program grow pretty substantially in the last 2 or 3 years. A dance room or dance studio is definitely something as well. We have a dance and movement class happening this year through our theater arts department, but having that they're doing essentially on the stage in the auditorium. But I would love to see that grow and be potentially options within our wellness department in the future. Our school store, our DECA program has grown. That's our business program, which is an extension of a lot of our business classes. And the school store is attached to our business classes in DECA. And that's a tiny little space that's not a particularly desirable space, but they got what they got. So something along those lines attached to our business department would be wonderful. This is not academic, but more related to wellness. If you've been in the main gym in the high school, you've seen there's kind of a cage in the back. That's where the weights are stored. From a safety standpoint, it kind of bothers me a little bit, but also being able to use that during times when there are other events happening in the gym, which is pretty frequent, is problematic. And it's a somewhat problematic space to be used. So that's something that I would.
Jerry, just to clarify, is there currently a CrossFit class that uses that space during the school day?
So the CrossFit class isn't in there exclusively, but they
Okay.
will use the weights during the day. And there are, I think Total Body Workout will sometimes use them as well. So there is at least one class that will make use of that space.
This is a combination of free weights and Nautilus, right?
Correct. If I'm going to dream big, also within the wellness department, a fitness center, so maybe some sort of a weight room / fitness center would be wonderful. And this is not something this is a much more of a pipe dream longer term, but something like a early childhood center. Where was it that we went? Was it Hudson that has?
Yeah.
Hudson has a daycare attached to the high school that they built with the new building. And high school students will go and spend time in the daycare during the day. So it's a wonderful benefit. If you're a teacher, you can have your child there in the daycare. I think people in the town probably use it as well. And students have the opportunity to go and work directly with kids. When I was a high school teacher, we actually had a daycare in our high school as well, and the high school kids did it. So those are kind of the either extensions or new things, new spaces that would make sense for me. I don't know, was there other stuff that you thought of, Michael, that you wanted to
Not
add?
beyond what the list was, no.
Yep.
But in terms of the store, we used to have a store.
Right.
When we renovated, we built the space for it, and that got cannibalized. And I think when you talk about dream big for a fitness center, I think that your coaches would say that's not a dream big. That's kind
Yeah.
of what
Right.
most sports teams have, is a fitness center for their athletes
Yeah.
in and out of season.
Plus, I think there is a curriculum piece that we could, I think
Oh,
we've got
absolutely.
seeds to, but we could add to get kids to see fitness to be a daily part of their routine
A
rather
lifelong.
than a lifelong learning component. So
Yeah.
some of us missed that class.
And as we are really dreaming big for the early childhood center, I think that that's really combines the mass work-based learning plan, the career, college and career readiness. There's a real experiential piece there that you can get no other way in a high school.
Sorry, I forgot one. Our theater classes currently take place in the auditorium. I think real theater programs have a theater space, and they use the auditorium for performance or for rehearsals, but they have a separate theater space for doing different activities. It's not happening in the auditorium.
Would that be different than the dance studio?
Probably, because if it's not, then you can't have classes scheduled at the same time.
Right. And the dance studio would be used by RAD as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, so rad, dance, yoga.
Yep, I think that would be used by a variety of different wellness classes.
One of the things I think you were doing this year is enhancing adding some academic support classes. Does that require specialized space?
So do you mean like the Math Foundations class?
Alternative.
You were expanding.
Oh, alternative ed space?
Maybe that's what it was, yeah.
Yes. I don't know that. Yes.
Okay, that requires specialized space.
That would require some specialized space. Things like access to a kitchen would be wonderful, so that you could integrate some like food prep, work study sort of stuff into that. So yes, some sort of a space for that would also be. That doesn't necessarily have to be a specialized space, but you need space for it.
Square footage.
Right.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or any follow-up on that?
I guess it was the list that you just came through, just to kind of round out other items that were discussed before. I know you talked about the art room and the computer science and journalism class and some of this other stuff. And is that a list of like the highest priority, or just rounding out what things you've already talked about in the in the past.
So what I was focused on is stuff that we don't already have, like new curricula, things that we
Okay.
don't already
Okay.
offer that we would love to offer in the future and would need space for. So that's not to, that list, the fact that art wasn't on that list doesn't mean that the art room space
No,
isn't.
So I know some of that stuff seemed like you're doing some of it, but maybe not in the most ideal
Yeah, we're really not.
conditions.
We have one semester-long dance and movement class. We don't really have like, true kind of dance.
Okay.
That is a dance class, but that's just like a very little thing. So expanding that would really require different space. Journalism, we offer some journalism classes, but we offer them in computer labs. Having more of a true journalism program, we want to have like unused space. So early childhood, that's not something we currently do, but new spaces, if that makes sense.
I just wanted to get
Yeah.
a perspective, because it sounded like some things that were being done currently, at least to some extent, kind of,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah, no, that's a good
understand
point.
that.
So currently, the weight room is not used for any wellness classes, it's just for.
So CrossFit does use it some. And some of the stuff, they'll sometimes take, wellness teachers will take stuff out of there
Yeah.
that might be stored in there and move it out, like they might bring out some small free weights to use.
Yeah, they don't.
And Total Body Workout, I think, uses it a little bit. And Total Body Workout does use it some.
Internet links.
But general wellness classes, they might do some rotation where they're teaching kids
Yeah,
how to
you
use
can't fit
weights.
15 or 20 kids.
Correct,
in
you
there.
can't fit many people in there, and it's not easy to really monitor a large group in there.
Right.
But-
And I think where we have multiple gym classes running at a time, once you start doing anything in there, the noise level goes so
Yeah.
much that somebody working with a group at that, the coaches can't be heard.
Right, okay.
So it receives some use during the day, but I would say it's probably used more after school by different weightlifting, by football team, the cross-country team will go in there, the track team will go in there and use it.
Okay.
And just to put a plug in about the early childhood, two plugs. One is, we were told, this is probably going on about 6 years ago, and then so the law or code may have changed, but if we were able to get a class younger than ninth grade into the high school, we would be eligible to put a flashing yellow light either overhead or on, like we have here for the school, on the side of the road to indicate that there is a school crossing or a school present.
Like a
within
20-mile-an-hour zone?
For a 20-mile-an-hour zone. 20-mile-an-hour zone.
Yep.
That's a quirk in their rules.
What's the grade threshold for that?
It has to be younger than ninth grade.
Ninth grade.
And the other piece is, it has certainly been brought to my attention on various occasions that if we had a central early childhood care available for our staff, that's a selling point for attracting staff. And so, I would have to do some research to see what kind of count we would have, but that would be I think, part of the intended population of kids that could be serviced through something like that. And when you have over 100 staff right there, you're bound to at least get 10 kids,
And a lot of them have
young children.
young children.
So,
When I worked at Algonquin, they took, I think they took teachers, kids first, and then had a wait list for community, and there was always a big wait list.
yeah.
Community loved having their kids there.
One of the things I've found out is that if we were to put some additional structure on there and had to change the entrance to the school, if the entrance were on Main Street, then we could change the speed limit.
As opposed to being on Green Road.
You'd be legally entitled to change the speed limit on 117 in front of the high school.
Interesting.
There's a reason why they didn't. I can't remember what it was, but that was a big debate in the last renovation and addition.
Well, I'm sure back then traffic on 117 was something that was appealing.
Appealing in what, you mean, like,
Well,
with the horse and buggies going by?
yeah, that kind of thing. You know, they still have a horse watering well at the top of the hill.
And what did they do? The most bizarre thing I ever saw go by my window was a llama. Somebody was walking a llama past the front. I know it's a total non-separate.
I haven't seen a llama yet.
Keep looking.
They're up on Vaughan Hill.
Of course. See the horse.
Yeah, but that was, and I'm sure that when
Yeah.
this all gets examined, they'll go back to that, but that was a big,
Yeah, I can't imagine why Green Road, the entrance there was, you know,
who knows?
but, okay. Anything else on space related to future curriculum changes?
I just want to say that on the spreadsheet that we have, some of the things you mentioned are in there, but some are not. So I can send this to you and you can add it
Yeah.
in once we look at it and talk about it. And
Sure.
so,
And I don't know where it goes in the agenda, but one of the things you'd asked me to do was to come up with some sort of an analogy or description for classroom utilization that might
Yes.
make sense, and I have something, so at some point.
This is a good time.
Perfect. So this is the same handout that I gave everyone a meeting or two ago about classroom utilization. I've added a second paragraph there now, however, that uses analogy, and I don't know if it works or not. And so I would love to get your feedback on it.
Yeah, I just think I think the analogy works.
Kind of started with musical chairs, but it was more complicated than that, and I tried to make it a little more
Yeah.
complicated without being too
With
complicated.
the
I don't know.
colors. So where you talk about if you have too many chairs,
Yeah.
I would take out, if you have too many chairs, then resources are not being used effectively, but if you have too few chairs, and I would just go, if the colors of the chairs don't match the colors of the players, the people are left standing. Because that's the idea you want to stick in people's head. And the
So
other
take out
stuff,
that if you have too many chairs.
or else move it after that sentence. Because it's a good point, but it gets in the way of the important idea.
Yeah, if you have more, if you have more than enough chairs of each color, when the music stops, everyone gets a seat. But if you have too few chairs and the colors of the chairs don't match the colors of the players, then people are left standing. See what you're saying, Bob?
Yeah.
So I think it works. Anybody else have any comments?
I think that the analogy works, but I guess, I don't know if it's worth kind of sticking one sentence at the end, kind of saying, you know, kind of with, somehow the various variables create a domino effect in the whole scheduling. I mean, we start talking about it, and we get, I think the musical chair thing's a good analogy, but I still think people have a hard time wrapping their head around, you know, 80, because we get into it, the next paragraph, 85% versus
Right.
93% and kind of whatever, that there's a scheduled domino effect that occurs, kind of like a punchline to the whole thing. I don't know what people's thoughts are.
I don't know how to say that simply and straightforwardly. I've
No, it's
spent my whole
complicated.
life.
Yeah, it's complicated.
To explain the different resources being, where the bottleneck becomes and how we've now moved into the classrooms are the bottleneck resource. And you're exactly right. If we're tight, we could have plenty of room everywhere else, but if science labs are tight, they're going to pin down the schedule in a certain way.
Well, another way to approach that is to say there are certain rules about scheduling, such as you need to be in the same room for every class. Right? As I understand what I've heard here over the past couple of years, there are just a couple of rules like that. You don't want to be changing classrooms every time the class meets.
The teacher.
Well, you don't want the students to know that, or have to figure out that on Tuesday they're meeting in 103 and
Yes.
in, Thursday it's 206 and, stuff like that. So you want the same classroom all the time, and once you get above, 85%, you may have classrooms available, but they're not available at the same time every day. Which means you can't schedule a class in those open spaces without breaking the first rule.
That happens when there's a class that meets every other day.
Okay.
Yeah. So that does, having the enhanced lab opportunity
Okay, but
virtually books that classroom for 2 periods.
right. And so unless you, again, even if you're meeting every other day, you want them to meet in the same place every time they're meeting.
Yeah.
And it's just, once you get above 85 or 87%, you can't do that. And it may be just that you need to put that in there. I have a question on the first page, the bottom paragraph, the first sentence. One possible approach to managing the lack of classroom space would be to have larger class sizes, thus decreasing the number of classrooms available.
Required.
Required or needed, right.
Required.
Okay.
Frankly, I don't think we can fit more kids into our classrooms.
Yep.
And it turns out, a lot of your classrooms, you really can't add more
No,
class.
we can't.
Would you guess it's on the order of half of your classrooms, or of nature you can't even add? I don't recall how to describe the wing, but there's a,
Well,
when you first head away from the offices in the first bank of
Yep.
classrooms, those are not large classrooms.
so again, the moving variables. So if we said, all right, we will put more kids into American Lit, and maybe one is already at 28, which maxes out, but there's a couple at 22, you're then cutting a section of American Lit, which forces kids who needed it the period that it was going to be available, to now have it over here, which means, and again, the big scheduler brain in Power School is thinking through, okay, now they're not here, so now band doesn't fit for these 6 kids here, so should we look at it here? Oop, now 4 freshmen lose band, but it's 4 freshmen versus 6 of this class. So everything in the scheduler is always considering everybody else's requests.
So one of the things is, as you get higher utilization, right? So like going from 85 to 86% isn't as big of a jump than from going from 92 to 93%. So that there's exponential difficulties the higher you go, right? So it's not
The
a
marginal difficulty increases.
yeah. So how about something along the lines that really high utilization rates creates an exponential increasing domino effect of students not able to get their desired classes? It's not just all about the
No,
the increase, it's about
Right.
how,
Right.
the higher you up that scale,
Right.
the worse it is.
Where there's a free period left, when all is said and done, doesn't mean that anybody can get a class there.
no, he's just trying to come up with language.
Verbiage to
Yeah.
kind of get it,
He's-
I think it's a very complicated,
You can pin it down, go for it,
Yeah.
Okay, so I changed a couple words, tell me what this is. So I said, leaving the analogy behind, too high a utilization means classes with different facilities requirements can't be scheduled at the optimum times. This creates a scheduling domino effect that limits when classes can be scheduled and therefore whether or not students can get the classes they want or need. And as the utilization rate gets closer to 100%, the negative ramifications for scheduling increase at an exponential rate.
It's good.
the only change I might make is rather than using 100%, using something like 90%, because it almost implies that
You could
that's a
get-
possibility of going to 100%.
As you get into the high or the mid to high 90s.
And as the utilization rate rises incrementally above 90%, the negative ramifications for scheduling increase at an exponential rate.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah. It's a complex, after hearing it for years, kind of trying to
Yeah.
relay it, so someone just goes, you got 7 more % to fool around with.
Right.
It is, and one of the things, and I don't know that needs to go in the report, that makes it particularly difficult for us is we don't have a vanilla curriculum. It's not like we're just offering one more section of generic math or generic science. You know, by having a rich, diverse curriculum, things are singletons and doubletons, and
I recall last year there was, it happened, the circumstances of scheduling made for there being the equivalent of one science classroom vacant because people were in other parts of the school and couldn't actually get people to show up for that particular room. As it turned out, there's an equivalent amount of vacancy in the science rooms, maybe one classroom is available at most times. I mean, I thought that was a very helpful example when I had to talk to people saying, you know, even though it's there, you can't actually get people to show up in the vacant classroom.
So 4 of the 7 periods of the day, every science classroom is used. There's another period where all but one classroom is used. Then there is one period where 2 different classrooms are not being used. And then there's one period where 3 different classrooms aren't being used. So the average availability is less than a classroom per period, 6 out of 7.
And non-continuous in terms of, you know, a particular room, for example.
Right, yes, yeah. It turns out that there's one classroom that happens to be available 2 periods, and then another classroom, and that's an environmental science classroom, which is not as, would not work as well for like biology or probably not even chemistry, Charlie's
or
classroom.
physics. Or
And then there's 2 other classrooms that happen to be available at the same period, but they're not available on another period. And those are also the physics classrooms. If you look at the biology and chemistry classrooms, I believe, there's one period where 2 of them are not used, but other than that, they are.
So I'll just quiz people here. Do you think that's a useful example to describe, you know, there is vacancy, but it's unusable, and therefore 90% is...
I think that kind of detail would lose people.
Okay.
But I think it's useful information to know, so
Yeah.
that when questioned,
Yeah.
you can say, well, here's why you can't go. You've
Right.
got, you know, an environmental science room that you can't teach physics or anatomy in.
Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on to the handout, the spreadsheet, or the multiple-page spreadsheet. Kathy Codian put this together. Thank you very much. We'll distribute this tonight or tomorrow on the soft copy. I guess the main point to put out here is where on the right-hand side where it says priority, on the spreadsheet itself, there are drop-down windows there. So you don't have to write anything in, you just have to go and select what you want. Okay? Right now, the priority ratings are what's on this little addition. And this is a draft. This is a first draft of what the priorities should be. It doesn't have to be the final word on this. I would hope people would take these and consider them. And, we could have some more discussion on these with or without making a decision today if you want. But just briefly to go through the spreadsheet, what Kathy did to put this together was to go through our first interim report, the second interim report, the administrative space needs study, the mechanical space needs inventory, and there was one or two other documents that I
think they were
can't remember. And she grouped them into these categories of mechanical systems, academic programs, athletics, student support, and student support.
It should be mechanical programs, athletics, and student support.
Okay.
You're not seeing the tabs there, but they should be labeled in the top.
They are.
left. Okay.
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
And so this gives us a chance to look at everything that's come up, assign priorities to it, and develop some kind of consensus about what the significance of these different issues is in preparation for making the final report.
So, Bob, to that end, is it going to be, what's going to be the metric for doing that? Is it going to be, because these are not numbered, right? So they're the words?
Yes.
Okay, so is it going to be the most that have critical, is that how it's going to?
Well, yeah, the way these priority ratings are made, critical would be the most important one, desirable would be the nice-to-haves.
Yep.
Right, so they're ranked in order of importance from top to bottom. But again, these priority ratings are a starting point for discussion.
But I guess I think part of it is like if all of a sudden everyone votes and you get 2 criticals, 5 importance, and 1
Yeah.
recommendation, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Right, well, that's what we have to work out.
Yeah.
That's what we have to work out. I mean, we could say we're going to change the priority ratings, we could say we're going to put weights to them.
Right, and couldn't you give them numbers, 4, 3, 2, 1, and if you voted like that, it'd be a 3.4 or whatever?
Well, yeah, except I think people need to know what a 1 means versus a 4, right? Just because you may think, yeah. I think you need to have some definitions beside them, but you could do that.
For a first, ultimately, yes, I think the group would come to consensus on, are we gonna all individually do this, or are we gonna do this as a group and decide?
That's what we need to discuss. That, I'm here to manage meetings. I'm not going to dictate how this gets done. I'm pretty, Kathy's put this. She's aggregated all the issues that have come before us in the past 2 years, because we're coming up on 2 years in December. she's aggregated all the issues that have come up to us in the past 2 years into one format, and we've got to figure out how to sort it out and prioritize it.
I think that if something is labeled critical, that somebody should be able to identify the health, safety, legal, or accreditation issue.
Okay?
Because I would agree that that is something, those health, safety, and legal, I think are hot topics that we have to pay attention to. And some jump out, anything that says lack of fresh air or sewage backs up. I think those are obvious things. Critical, yeah. Some of the roof issues, some of the issues that weren't addressed during the last renovation.
One thing to consider here is, and I mentioned this last time, what if the forecast for student enrollment is that it's going to decline between now and 2025? Right? That's a whole different discussion than saying we need more space. Then it becomes a discussion of what do you do with the space you have to, and I think this has to come out being a priority list that you could use in either case to both address what happens if you're going to add space or what happens if you're not going to add space.
Right, I think the very beginning question that we were trying to answer is how do we address the condition and space needs to address student performance?
Yes.
It has to kind of come back and bubble up through
Right.
the end result of this.
Right. Right. And part of that is what are the different grades of issues that affect student performance? Again, this is a first draft of what those would be.
At least my 2 cents is, it doesn't seem, my opinion is, it wouldn't be very fruitful for everyone individually to kind of go home and fill it out themselves and take their stab at it, because I think you'll end up with, everyone will have a little different, slightly different ranking of what important is or recommended is, or what that means to them. And then there's a piece of this, obviously, that are more that's kind of I think the from the teaching professionals have a bigger input for some of these items than those that aren't in the profession, kind of what have you. So, like, to me, I think I like the list. I think I like the priority and kind of having to go through it, but it almost seems like if someone else would take a first pass and it could be kind of a discussion of kind of do people agree, or kind of bring up different points, then so I think some of that stuff kind of the benefits of the student not widespread across all students. I mean, some of it might be obvious, but other things I think are what's impacting student performance. I don't know if that's something that I should be weighing in on and kind of saying, hey, where's that? I can have an opinion.
Another way to do that, so that we're not doing it separately, would be to have the different rows like we have on the spreadsheet, but instead of one priority list or one column, we have as many columns as we have categories. So your first thing, you decide, let me just put numbers here instead of words. Is that a number 1, and this is a number 3, and this is, a number 2, and the next one's a number 4. And we could go through the whole list as a group. Now, I would say that we could do this, but we have to remember that we're going to have to go through the list several times for this reason. Because if we say we're only gonna go through the list once, then everybody's gotta feel that they've gotta get their way the first time we go through it. And we'll never get past the first page. Okay? So we're gonna take a first pass, and then we're gonna go back, we'll discuss that again a second time, and see if anybody's changed their opinions based on what happened 2 pages later and stuff like that. That's another way we could go about doing this. But it's what do people feel comfortable doing, and how much time do you want to put into this? You know, do you want to have some extra meetings just to address this between now and the end of the year, or do you want to go into the next year, or? You know, I don't think we're going to get through all of that in a final version in one meeting.
It seems like we could go through this as a group and at least have the consensus items knocked off. I mean, when you say, you know, fresh air is pulled in from the upper, we need air, if we all go, yeah, no, that's a critical need, that's wrong in how the building was designed, let's cross that one off. Maybe we get to the art rooms, all 3 served by the same HVAC unit, we say, well, maybe not, we gotta come back, that's a grayer area. Like, can we do the easy ones first?
I'm inclined to agree with that, and I think
that's fine. I think what you'll find is by the time you get to the end of the list, what you thought were the easy ones aren't really that easy.
I believe you. And Kathy, you talk about critical areas because of health, safety, legal, and accreditation, but I would also say, like building stability, this is a massive investment for the town. If the roof might not currently be health, safety, or legal, but it's the life of the building, and does that need to, you know?
Well, the roof is mentioned throughout, so, yeah, and in the previous renovation, the roof, not all areas of the roof was done.
I mean, I would think it's critical just because it's, like I think of my own house, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I think we need to agree what critical is. If we can't,
Those are the ones we'll have to come back to, because guidance, of course, can be critical. But I recognize that not everybody will see it that way.
Yeah, so, you know, the first thing we need to define is if you want to go down that route, if everyone's comfortable with that, we can start doing that. Michael, your name was next to this, and I apologize, I should have asked you what specifically, was there something you wanted to put in on this? No, on the agenda.
Oh.
Your name was next to it, and I should have, okay. So what's the definition of critical then?
oh, I'm happy with the definition right there.
Okay.
Joe, you was just quibbling before you got to the list, so.
I was here on time.
So it should be accreditation and guidance issues, is that?
No, my thing was building the longevity of the building, something that's gonna wear the building down or be a bigger issue later on.
But critical could also be related to your ability to deliver the program as it's intended. I mean, you're
Yep.
taking the art rooms, for example, and they go into more detail somewhere. Maybe it's under program, the problems with art rooms. They're small, they hold minimal equipment. Each room needs to be specialized, which constrains the room availability and uses. I mean, this is where the studio art room is converted interior classroom, no natural light or storage. So I would say if you have an art program, especially if you have studio art, maybe ceramics not so much, but you want to have a source of natural light.
I would call that important, because the word, I mean, if we define I like the way you define critical here, because I think if you define critically too broadly, then everything becomes critical, and then nothing's critical.
Right, but I think it's clearly the issues with art and science are connected to HVAC issues as well.
Yep.
But something to address that is specific to program delivery. So you can't teach physics in an environmental science room, that type of a thing. I don't know how you classify
So do you have critical and then critical to curriculum?
Oh.
I mean, critical to me sounds like when you say health, safety, legal, or accreditation issues, you're kind of talking about fixing them in the near term regardless.
Perhaps.
And then critical to curriculum, the strength of your ability to provide that curriculum.
But even in that example, wouldn't that just become a recommended? Because
What on this list isn't critical to curriculum?
I know.
I like the priority ranks you got right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the descriptions, and I like the idea that critical means, oh my gosh, we need to take care of this.
And
as soon as possible.
again, these don't depend on the results of the enrollment study.
And the bulk of these got put on the list because we did as a group identify them as a
Right, as needs.
We didn't put on the frivolous, like, ooh.
Some of the
What
guidance
do you
stuff
have
is
that's
frivolous.
frivolous? No, none of the guidance stuff is frivolous. I didn't say that, but what else?
No, I
But,
see.
you know, I think when we did our walkthroughs, when we talked about things, when we gathered info, I mean, you're right, everything we were talking about is kind of critical to the curriculum. Yeah,
And-
you're right,
And so, to me, that becomes too general.
Right.
yeah.
You've got to be able to scale it in some way.
Okay, get us started.
All right, so-
Captain, more captain.
We have no proposals to change the definition of critical, so using the definition of critical before you, let's go through the list and just see if we agree on what's critical. So the first is the home team locker rooms.
Critical.
Critical,
Okay. The school kitchen.
I think that's critical. Mike,
I
I'm
don't,
the only
I
one.
don't, no, I think the home team locker room is critical. I don't think the school kitchen issue is critical.
Pulls in outside air.
And it pulls in outside air and is tied to the heating. It's an inefficiency, it creates an inefficiency in the heating system.
Right,
So-
but that's limited to the
Health,
kitchen.
safety.
Well, I think if you ask the people working in the kitchen,
Well,
oh,
the issue, as I recall it,
mhm.
is that in the extremely cold days that we had, more heat was being, the heating system couldn't keep up with all the cold air being pulled through the kitchen, because it's not preheated.
So
Or
when I
sufficient-
think of what you have to do to maintain like run a building, to me that would be, it's like leaving a window open in your house. It's critical, you know.
Well,
It's
he's
not
going-
efficient, but I don't call
But
it critical.
I don't see the effect on students.
Does that-
Could we
Everything's a
skip
cold
the
lunch?
hard ones and go to the easy ones? and then come
Yeah, you said
back?
these would be easy, Jody.
We got through one.
Okay, so.
Drafting
we-
lab.
is Drafting lab, okay.
Does anybody think that should be critical? Hearing nothing, I'll go on to the computer lab. It overheats. Is that critical?
This is 224.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially, it makes the room unusable, doesn't it?
It's uncomfortable.
In May.
Uncomfortable.
I would say uncomfortable, not unusable.
So,
I don't believe we have ever
Yeah,
vacated room
it's
224
cold.
because the heat made it unusable.
There's
Yeah.
no AC going into that room.
I don't know. I think we have
224,
AC
that's
going in there,
windows?
don't we?
Does it get hot enough to cause an
Yeah.
issue with the computers?
No.
I don't think it's
Not-
critical.
Bill Cleary didn't mention that.
Okay, then that takes it off.
I think it becomes a
That's
warm room
critical.
over the course of the day.
Yeah.
All right, the media center? Nobody's arguing for critical there. The classrooms below the media center? Okay?
So I would
I think that is
honestly say
critical.
that is critical, because
Because-
I've got teachers wearing long johns every day and
Yeah.
teachers teaching in gloves.
Yeah. Those are two large spaces, square footage, and they shouldn't be on the same air handler.
So the media center and the
Well,
classrooms?
no, the classroom's below the media center.
Okay.
And you've got students who are wearing jackets all
Right.
winter
Yes,
and
and then
gloves and
going-
trying to write with their hands in
And then going to much warmer
Right.
classrooms.
That's true. The
It-
science
it's-
rooms, yeah,
The science
they're
rooms are
ridiculous.
freezing.
And typically, the classrooms in that lower level are.
Those are all the science.
Science
Those are all
classrooms.
science classrooms. They're not
But
all
yeah,
of
but
the
the,
science.
like the foreign language classrooms are fine. It's that area below the media center that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 labs,
Yeah.
science labs, and their supply rooms
Yeah.
that are just frigid.
Okay. Now, the science labs, and the particular reference here is in regards to the HVAC, not the overcrowding or the fixed, the small square footage or anything like that. Is this critical?
Is, for, in this category, is it that in part we have a ventilation going straight out the wall and these things are really leaky and not so comfortable in the winter?
Right.
Is that the correct rooms that I'm thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd vote for.
This is where we had a
critical on that.
water issue because there are water pipes in those walls, and they broke. So,
Is that a chronic problem or has it been fixed?
Well, the
in that
water,
particular area, it was
the
fixed.
problem is there's a skin on the building, and
Mhm.
there's the interior walls, and there's an uninsulated space between the two.
Right.
And it got so cold that since no one was drawing water, the water
Yeah.
pipe between the two just froze.
I see.
Now, that water pipe
That happened.
breaking, it spilled into the science lab and got the floor wet, but
Is that the science?
I don't know that that's.
It went down,
It was
into
foods,
the.
though. It was foods
Right.
down to the
Foods.
math.
Right,
It's
it was
down
math,
to-
it's not science, yeah.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
why I was confused.
Yeah.
So is that wrong?
I
It's
think
the same
Maybe we're
wall,
confusing
it's the same wall
fixed
structure on the
benches
science
against
side as
exterior
well.
wall.
That was it, that was after
It's not
science
different.
lab.
So the leak was in, the leak was just in a different part of the building, but it's the same issue.
But they relocated that pipe, so it's more in a heated space, but are all the pipes in that similar configuration relocated?
No, they were not, just that one.
So there are others that
There are
are.
others waiting to be,
That's good.
Frozen.
Okay,
Other
But-
disasters.
but that's not, it doesn't,
It's
I
not
don't see
critical.
that's a safety
It's
issue.
very
yeah,
important.
it's important, I would
So
say
it's not
important.
critical, okay.
Not critical.
All right, the art room. They're all served by the same HVAC unit, and they get different amounts of sunlight and consequently heat up and cool off at different rates.
Not critical.
Okay?
Recommended.
We're doing critical
Oh, sorry.
first. Then we'll move back.
No drains for, in the science room, no drains for eye wash station and showers.
That's not, it's not critical, because that's actually the way they're designed.
That's the way it's supposed to be,
That's the way
okay.
they're supposed to be.
All right, so we should,
Doesn't make sense to us lay people,
No.
but,
Oh, yeah, Bill's explained that.
yeah.
so should we take that off this
I think we
list?
should take it off the
Yes.
list, yeah.
Okay? All right, Kathy?
I got it.
Okay.
Nice, we got one down.
Um,
Delete.
So in the kitchen, the equipment in there is original to the building. It's
Yes.
50, 60 years old. It works. There's a grease trap that is undersized for the size of the student population.
I don't think,
I don't see that as
I
critical.
don't think it's critical. It's
Okay.
really-
Home team locker rooms, now this isn't directly in the locker rooms, this is in spaces adjoining the locker rooms.
Nonetheless,
Anytime something that is septic backs up, I would say that's
Okay.
critical.
Yep, anywhere on the property.
Yeah.
How often does this
Yeah.
occur?
So when you said the
Sometimes.
septic system backs up, does that mean that like,
I just
I think it's
copied
the
and
gases.
pasted this from what
yeah,
you
I think it's
guys
just, I think it's just the gas. I don't think it's like the,
Remember when we did that second tour?
No, there have been, my understanding is there has been stuff that came up from the drains in the boys' shower room.
effluent.
That's my understanding.
Stuff.
I couldn't tell you how long ago that was, but it
Maybe
happens.
we've had issues with smell, but we haven't had,
Yeah,
I
you
wasn't
know,
aware of that.
Okay.
it's too bad Bill's not here, because he could
I'm gonna ask
definitively
him.
answer that.
So apparently
Wake
at
'em
least
up.
once, stuff, and then more occasions, gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Security on the exterior doors, not all doors have security cameras.
I think that's critical.
I agree.
Interior, there's only cameras in the hallways and stairways, not in all common
I
areas.
think that's
Critical.
critical.
Fans, compressors, pumps. Throughout the building, they were last upgraded during the 2000-2002 project, upgrade project. Their normal lifetime is 10, 12 years. Now, they were, replacing all this stuff was in the long-term maintenance plan that Bill Cleary presented to us.
This
Um,
is general maintenance, so
It's general maintenance, you know, this is the kind of thing where if you're doing a large project, it makes, and you're moving stuff in these areas, it makes stuff to add it in, but I don't think this kind of thing would drive a project,
Nope. No,
all right? Okay, the roofs.
those are critical.
It's
It's general maintenance, but they're all gonna generally fail at the same time at this point, given the schedules that we've had.
Well, I think the last one that says degraded severely is a critical.
The guidance office, major league, skip down
Yeah, 'cause
Is
wasn't there some phasing of when they were looking to do roofs? So
Yeah,
that there's
we've been phasing them in.
sections that are in worse conditions, but they're all lining up to all need it, but maybe at
Right,
various
so,
times.
you know, my question then is that something you take care of when you're doing a large project, or does that drive the project? To me, critical stuff drives the project.
I think if you're working in the area where some of the worst things are, you absolutely have to fix it.
Right.
But if you're in an area that, you know, it needs to get addressed, but it's further out, you may opt to do it as part of the project, but you
there. Down between us and Tanya.
may not, depending on the
Right.
timing and budget and kind of all those other things.
I like the clarification that you just stated, Bob. I don't think it drives the project, but it's the two major academic wings, which are the most expensive roof repairs.
Yeah.
So they're both roughly $1 million of coverage that we'd have to do. So it would be challenging to do close together, which means you're essentially, not until you paid off one, would you get to the next, and that's too far apart given the age of both of them. So I don't think it drives the project, I really don't, but I think it's
It's considered because you're gonna spend the money anyhow real
Right.
soon.
right.
Okay, so it's not critical, but we'll be assigning it to some other category.
Right.
Right.
The other piece of
important.
it is,
It's not a
since it is
driver,
a roof, that it, you know, leaks could have an impact on kind of, you know, stuff you renovated, stuff you're doing, I mean, kind of, there's an investment, you know,
Well-
the cost of the roof is minor compared to the damage that you could do
Right.
if it isn't done.
I'd be loath to, let's say, renovate the kitchen or the cafeteria and spend a lot of money there and not fix the roof to make sure that my investment is in place.
Yeah,
But that's different than saying that roof's a problem, it's not in danger of collapse, it's in danger of leaking, therefore, that's gonna drive my project.
Right. There are no roofs in danger of collapsing.
On Bill Clary's capital plan, are roofs on his?
They're on there.
A couple years out? on his
They're out
list?
there,
Yeah.
But he's sort of
piecemeal,
listed
way
all
out.
saying we need to do something about
Right.
it. How's he sort of structured his document? Do you have a,
There-
does he have a prioritization saying this one really we need to do next when we do something on the
It's
roof?
based on the year that they were installed, so they're prioritized in that way, not in terms of condition at this point.
Got it.
Okay. Going on to the second page. We're now starting on academic programs. The science labs, classroom size, given current dimensions and recommended size.
Oh, it was just a note I put just for sake,
Yep.
in the future, if we're sharing this, I think it would be good to help people understand the issue with size.
Okay. Is this critical or important, or?
I think these are critical.
I think the school district has already identified these as
Yeah.
critical.
Is everyone okay with? Okay. Problems with venting and configuration of safety. Okay, do we have 3 rows there or 2?
2.
Okay, so
The other
those.
two, the impact rows don't line up.
Oh, okay. So both of those are critical.
Mhm.
All right. The art room. I don't think we, I guess I would treat each of these areas as one, as opposed to having, for the art room, do we have 4 different rows that we need to attend, or are we just talking about the art room in general? I would treat the whole thing as one.
Me too. Mhm.
Okay, so is that critical? I would argue it's not what we want, but I don't think it drives the project.
I don't think it's important.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think it would be,
Okay.
stick with that description, it's important.
Okay, theater arts, right now, we're just identifying critical though, so
Yeah,
we will
yeah.
come back to
We'll
that
come
stuff.
back.
Theater arts.
So if we agree, you can slap it down there.
No,
Stick with the program.
You stick with the program. Well, you stuck with this one, you gotta change this one too. No, theater arts. Is that critical?
No.
Okay. Computer science and journalism, is that critical? Or does anybody feel that's critical? Okay. Wellness, does anybody feel that's critical?
I actually think this is critical because I think the placement of the weight room is a safety issue. And we're going to have an issue there.
Anybody want to challenge that? Is everybody okay with that?
Is that partially because it's sort of an open area and also tight behind the cage and
It's
it's not really
tight.
well controlled? Just a whole combination of
All combination of those. It's too tight. Somebody is just going to turn around, not doing anything, just turn
Malicious,
around and
yeah.
just bang somebody, getting hot off the bench press.
The other thing to consider is that floor underneath that must be turned into putty. With all that weight banging down on it.
Yeah.
Right, because it's a wooden floor. But, okay. Special education?
Did we get the coordinated program review? Did they have any comments about space and size and stuff like that?
For special education,
Yeah,
we did have some issues that were quickly addressed, but
not relative to any of this stuff here?
well,
high school?
I think they are relative because for example, therapeutics. That wasn't one that was mentioned. We had some spaces that are in our media center,
Mm-hmm,
and because they're window walled,
mm-hmm,
they felt privacy was a concern.
mm-hmm.
We addressed those, but I think a more appropriate place would be a four-walled area. Again, I don't think it's critical, but I think it's right up there.
Anybody in special education critical?
The ISS and therapeutic borders on critical for me. Because I think that does get into definitely emotional safety,
And I think emotional health. for
emotional
students.
health.
For students. If those two things are happening at the same time, you have kids with disruptive behaviors and kids with fragile health, like that are
Yes.
having an anxiety attack as a result, it kind of doesn't serve either of them.
What's ISS?
In-school suspension.
Is that that's not the therapeutic?
So a student's done something they shouldn't do that rises to a decent level, they are taken out of class for a half a day or a day. That space adjoins the therapeutic program.
Oh, I see, so that would be a critical.
So I would see the second one of those too,
Okay.
but not
Got
the
it.
first one.
Yeah.
Not that the first one's not important.
No, it might be important, but we're just doing critical.
Exactly right. Try to follow the rules.
All right.
What is the size of the
Yeah.
in-space, in-school suspension space?
Say again? What is the,
What size of the room?
the in-school suspension space
Like by 10
is
maybe.
15 by 15, kind of?
there to there.
So 10 by 15, maybe
Ish.
small.
Yeah, no, it's a small
couple,
space.
3 people, 4 people start
And
to
we,
feel out.
we don't have lots of kids in
It was
there.
built to be a testing room for the school psychologist, a round table of 2 people.
Okay, transition program? No critical? Okay. Anybody think the academic support center should be critical? Okay. The ELL. What's that?
English language learner.
Thank you.
I think it was critical, but we did some things, I think, to take it off the critical list, but I would still say it's, I don't know that I would say it's critical, but it's certainly pretty important.
All right.
I would agree with the statement that it's not what we want it to be.
The emergency medical technician, is that critical? No, okay. Let's skip future for now. Let's stick, we will come back to that. So that puts us on to athletics. The athletic administrator's office,
Not critical.
okay. The training room,
I think it's critical.
I think it's
Yeah,
critical.
I think that might
that
be
with the big
critical.
room.
It's critical. It's a safety issue for the kids, privacy issue.
okay. Let's see.
Ordinarily, would the training room be near the athletic director's office in an ideal
No.
world? So
No, but near the gym.
near the gym.
Yeah, or near the fields, yeah.
Yeah.
With space for the kids who need to stretch,
Right.
stretch.
Is there anything under indoor athletic space concerns that people feel is critical?
Yeah.
No? Okay. The locker rooms, ventilation. Didn't we take care of that in the first page?
I think it's critical. We're getting your first air in there.
Yeah, we already,
Yeah.
that was already critical. That was on the first page, under HVAC. Storage, certainly the athletic, the backups are critical to address.
Sorry.
I know.
Room with sewer cleanup pipe filled with athletic equipment, making it difficult to deal with sewer blockages quickly.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that sounds worse than it
That
is,
sounds funny.
there's big pipes in there, and
Yes.
nothing actually flows into this area where the storage is. But to clear the blockage in the pipes,
gotta move all
you
the
gotta move
equipment.
everything
Well, I get it.
there, and that gives you access to the pipes.
It's funny if you actually picture it. I get it.
Well, it's just, yeah,
Yeah.
We can
You
take care
gotta
of it.
clean it. Okay. No,
you know,
I've been
it's not
there.
like stuff's getting all over the wrestling mats and.
Yeah.
No, anyway, okay, the weightlifting, we identified that as critical, weightlifting room. That the referees have to use the coach's office in the boys' locker room and the phys ed teacher's locker room.
Not
No,
critical.
okay. And the visitors' locker rooms. Does anybody feel that that's a critical?
There's, I don't know if this is related to the air ventilation issue. None of these issues are as critical to me, but the room smells and has poor air ventilation. I don't know why
The
we
visitors'
didn't count-
locker room?
The visitors'
That's to
locker.
psych them out.
Maybe.
I thought that was
I
a
think
strategy.
it's because it's so heavily used and so much equipment's in there
Okay.
and
It's on a separate
It's for-
ventilation system than the locker rooms downstairs.
Yes, it is, yeah, yeah.
But it's It's a dump.
Gross.
It is a dump.
But it's not
Not a drive.
gonna
It's not
drive the
drive.
project.
Yeah, it's not gonna drive the project, no.
Yes.
It is.
So something we've never really talked about in a general way is storage. And so this last page is talking about all kinds of stuff
Yep.
that there's no place for it to live.
EMTs, there is no storage anywhere. We're storing things. All the music for band and chorus is stored on the stairway going up to the lights in the theater.
I'll give you
Yeah,
a silly
correct.
example. We have a ping pong club, group of kids who want to play ping pong. They were able to get a table donated last year. It's stored in part of the science hall. They told me that they have a couple new tables that they wanted donated, and they wanted to be able to set them up. I've literally got nowhere for them to store it. I said, sorry guys, you're stuck with one table. Silly example, but we just don't have anywhere to put stuff.
Yeah.
Is it conceivable that a space, maybe even not even connected to the main building, is sensible for storage? Or does it really need to be an integral part of the
Well, we have some
school for-
outdoor storage space as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
But if they're like
Yeah.
a warehouse-ish, like storage things 40 feet away from the building, is that even sensible as a way to handle some long-term
Not-
storage?
Particularly not during the winter, no.
Yeah, I mean, it depends if it's something you need regular access
Like
to.
the EMTs pull their stuff out at night during class. They've got to
Right.
pull all their stuff down.
So
when
it's a
they come
constant
back.
access thing,
Yeah.
and the athletic stuff is probably fairly constant, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are
It's
we,
gotta be easy to put away, too.
are we also storing things that we don't really need to store?
I don't think so.
I'm just curious. I'm thinking, like, are there old textbooks that are stored because they're no longer used, but we haven't gone through the
Point.
process to remove them? Or are we storing chemicals or old equipment in science, storage that
So
maybe is
textbooks,
outdated?
yeah, I mean, yes, we've got some small closets where there's
Right.
textbooks.
That's not really impacting the storage. I'm just kind of,
Yep.
there's a combination of factors at play. Not having enough, but then also continuing to store.
I mean, I
things
wouldn't
we
say
don't
that
need
we've
to
got
store.
like a ton, it's not like we've got a lot of storage space into just a bunch of junk sitting there.
Okay.
We have pretty limited storage space. I mean, we've got some of the stuff that you would expect a high school to accumulate over time. but
Right.
There's not a whole lot of place to put stuff.
So it's kind of exacerbating the problem, but it's not the root of the problem. Like the extra stuff.
It's a
is-
symptom of the problem.
Right, it's not.
So I feel like it might be a revisitable topic, that it's an issue in a lot of different places that's not really been
Yeah.
It's an
discussed.
issue everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
It's probably not gonna drive the project, but
Right.
it's critical to whatever gets decided.
Yeah, it's gonna be part of the solution.
Right.
Okay, now we're on student support.
We can just skip that whole
Oh, you wanna
first
skip
one.
guidance?
Nothing,
Okay.
got nothing.
So there are multiple things on here that I would, put as important, but I do think that there's a critical nature to the fact that there's very little privacy in a space where kids are coming down and they need privacy. So I mean, that's the piece to me that's critical here.
It's like a mental health safety thing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly.
When you have a frightened kid,
Mhm.
That's
anxiety
right.
attack.
So how about if you add another row for guidance
Yep.
that says overall need for privacy for students? And are we okay with putting critical next to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would put critical next to some of the things that are in here, like the no conference room. I think that that's a function of that. Waiting area for students next to office secretary, I think that's a function of that. But I mean, that could be,
Jody, did you see in any of the schools you visited a design that made sense to you in terms of things like parents having a different entrance, maybe that from students or things that are called out here?
When you walk into Shrewsbury, you walk into an open area, there's a desk manned by students here, manned by secretary here. You go forward, there's double doors that go into a conference room that also serves as a student lab and then counselor offices are down either corridor. So you definitely can interact with guidance, you can get general information, you can have a kid set up on a computer and they're separated from what's going on in the private areas.
Mhm.
There's private areas. And the same, Westboro is virtually the same way, only theirs is a larger open area and the kids are working right there in the larger open area with two secretaries. and then the guidance offices are down a hallway.
I would say that the waiting area for students next to office secretary, students hear office secretary greet callers and hear the can hear the conversation is,
Yes.
I don't know
Yep.
if it has legal
Okay.
ramifications there, and to me that is a huge issue, particularly given the
Okay.
kinds of conversations that might be
Yeah, right.
being relayed.
So, we'll put,
I'm marking these as we do them.
okay,
Okay.
good, thank you. Okay, down in administration, are there any issues there that are critical?
I think everything except for the kitchen space.
So what, you think everything is critical here?
Yeah, I mean, the layout is, the first impression of walking into our high school is that we're compact, you know? I mean, just the fact that we open the door and you're gonna whack a few teachers who are getting their mail. I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
And then you're stumbling over boxes that just got.
Yeah, I mean, it's the layout, and maybe maybe it's not the size, maybe it's just the layout, if somebody wanted to plan it differently. But
I think
it's critical.
it's critical that the conference room, the lack of conference room space
absolutely.
is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
And that there's another lack of privacy issue for kids here. They're waiting, with families and parents waiting for the conference room.
Right.
Kids who maybe are in trouble, waiting to see an administrator. Everything's all happening in that same one general place. Kids are checking in tardy, teachers are getting their mail. It's,
And it makes it slightly chaotic in that sense because because of that, the barrier where visitors sign in and then the secretary is way behind.
Yeah.
There's no real way for them to filter out who
Right.
needs help when, so even addressing a parent need as they come in or addressing a student need, unless the student just kind of blows on by and goes right up to the desk, so.
But something like that can be dealt with by reconfiguring
Right.
that space,
Right.
as opposed to
right.
A whole new
having a
project.
building
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
Right, you
Yeah.
could reconfigure the space for the transient stuff to come through, for teachers to have a back entrance, but we have got to have another office for another administrator, and we have got to have more conference room space. Has to happen.
Right.
That privacy stuff I can see as critical, but like some of the other things about, no space, deliveries, holding teachers' materials, how does that relate to health, safety, legal, or accreditation issues?
Well, when I see the UPS deliveries, a couple of things come to mind. I mean, literally, there are tripping hazards in terms of some of the locations of where they do that, but also some security issues in terms of that. I mean, we should have a way to receive things in a different location in the building, not into the main office. So that, things like that.
One thing that's not mentioned specifically here, but the configuration relative to the front door. So I can see who comes up to the front door, and then once they go in,
You lose visibility to it.
I lose direct visibility.
Right, but you could reorganize that space if you took out that and put a doorway right in there.
Right.
You could, yeah. You could knock
without
out.
rebuilding, you could remodel that to put a doorway right in there.
You could knock out the.
That's a structural wall. That's going to be a big
Yeah,
project.
it's not inexpensive.
Is it critical?
It's critical to have structure.
Was that office, is that an original office for the original high
No.
school?
That whole
No,
thing was,
that's all
that was the
add-on.
2002 add-on.
I see.
By the way, where it says student cooling off space, I think that's the same one we covered on an earlier page. So
Well, they're saying to locate
No.
it within the central office area. It's,
No.
no?
no, that's
No.
different.
This is different than
Yeah,
the
this
Okay.
is, I've made some real poor choices, I'm pretty escalated, I need to talk to an administrator, I've talked
Okay.
to him, I still need to chill for a little bit, my parents are coming,
Okay,
and I got no place to be.
okay.
And I'm 17 or 18 years old.
So what do we have for critical here? The conference room
Yes,
is critical?
Conference room, and what about the cooling off space for kids?
yes. And I think, you know, possible office for either school resource officer and/or dean of students. I don't think we can space.
That's not that's not impacting health, safety, legal, or accreditation issues.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Where is the,
That's just my.
where does the resource officer hang out, or have a desk, or a cubby?
So he's on his feet a lot, so he's around the building. When he needs to sit and do a report or something, oftentimes he'll go to the bomb shelter.
Literally, bomb shelter. That can't be safe, legal, or
Oh, it's safe, it'll protect you from bombs.
certainly not healthy.
And does that happen to be a place where there's a bunch of storage as well?
Yes.
All right,
I mean, it is literally a bomb shelter.
Right.
That's filled.
That's,
Filled
that's
with
got.
stuff.
Yes.
Ironically, it's tough to get things into that room, right? I mean,
With
Yes.
steps and curves and stuff.
And you actually go in, and it's also the entrance to a girl's bathroom, so.
yeah.
Handy.
Next page,
Thank you.
Good job, Bob, keep us moving.
meeting space.
It looks like the first two, are those related to the conference room that we mentioned in the other one?
Mhm.
Okay. And is that third one the same conference room?
Yes.
Right, I mean,
So the first three rows here are, we've already covered them as critical.
Right, that middle one there, the NOADAC collaboration space for teachers. I think that's a critical element, because teachers talking to teachers, I think is critical. It's a good practice. So,
Okay.
you know, it didn't come up really in our conversations over the last 2 years now, but is it not necessary for like a one conference room almost to be dedicated for IEP and 504 meetings for special ed, I mean, to be near the school psychologists kind of thing? Yes. I think, yeah.
So therefore, at least two
Yes.
conference
At least two
rooms are
conference
desirable, and perhaps more.
yes. Minimum,
My office becomes a conference room on a
regular basis.
Right.
Yes, we have currently full-time need for, and I would say we need 3. You know, you talked about college rep visits, you talked
yeah.
about family 504 meetings,
Right.
you know.
The informal.
You could easily have a guidance, and then a front
And-
office, and then special
Special ed.
education.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very appropriate.
Anything else on the meeting space? Okay, food services. I think this is something that came up in the NEASC study. Teachers felt that they quoted the teachers as saying that the cafeteria is crowded and that that's a problem. They didn't really.
I think that's old information in terms of, because I think the 4 lunches is taking care of much of that. And the new design and added seating has taken up much of that.
Are you talking about the old NEASC report or the
No,
new,
the new one.
the new NEASC report?
You know, well,
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's crowded, yes.
I think that they're crowded. I think that the critical need is to have a quiet eating space. We've got kids with sensory issues. We've got kids, fragile kids, for whom they can't go in there with 200 kids in there and the noise level and the freneticness of everything. And we have no, because we don't have a conference room.
Right.
We can't even, you know, you take somebody who's having a real struggle getting to school and,
well, if you had a separate space for students like that, would you run into, I mean, could that space be literally a separate room? Or would
Yes.
you run into issues that these children are supposed to be mixed in with the general population?
no, if I have someone who's having a hard day who wants to, if I had a room that was a designated quiet lunchroom, I would have kids every day who would choose to eat their lunch in there. And I wouldn't say you need a special permit to go in there to have quiet lunch. It would just be that it was the quiet lunchroom.
Okay.
Could
So,
something like that come in demand, and therefore there's actually an unmet need perhaps of
Do I think so?
Several flavors of that kind of
Yes, I think
space.
so. But that's just my opinion
Right.
versus,
Right.
I know there's an identified need for some of our fragile kids to have,
Right now, they go to the ASC, they go to the band room. and-
sit,
They have lunches
sit out in
there?
front in the hallway.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we have kids who eat their lunches in the ASC every day. We have kids who eat lunch in the band room every day. And part of that's,
Coming down to
for
guidance.
band, part of it's because they like that space and being with their friends.
Yeah.
It's quieter, but part of it's also because they want to get out of the lunchroom, because the lunchroom's so
Yeah, no,
quiet.
that's fine, I'm just,
ASC is
and-
what?
Academic Support Center, that's the space in the back of the media center.
okay. So that's critical.
And food is permitted in these various spaces as well? Or by default, perhaps, if not?
Yes, it is
by permission?
allowed, yeah. Well, and quite frankly, when we've got as many kids in the cafeteria as we do, and
We would like to be able to relieve.
there are 20 kids who are going to filter off to other places, and that's a better space for them, then yes, we're flexible about that.
Okay, school psychologist,
Doesn't have a real office.
It's not addressing health, safety, or legal or accreditation issues.
yeah, again, I don't know that that would drive the project. If you're gonna be looking at spaces, and I would say the same with the speech pathologist.
Yeah,
Okay.
same with the videotape.
Yeah,
So-
I was gonna say that, in that particular case, that's really a
So,
closet,
right,
she's in a closet.
The school psychologist is in a room that doesn't have, the wall doesn't meet the wall, right? Remember? That, you know, that is in an open area, it's,
I'm not saying it's okay as it is.
I know,
It's just
doesn't drive
a big-
me.
It's the word critical.
Yeah. So let's go back to, is it the second page or the third page where we discussed future stuff? The third page.
Programs, future, yep.
Just out of curiosity, obviously one of the things we spend a lot of time on is the lack of like classrooms, the utilization, and we have numbers in here about whether you had full more classes or kind of, but nowhere in here is there just like classrooms, just even
Yeah.
just the generic
That's right.
classrooms where if that's a critical need, and we're saying, hey, we need X number more, at some point, it seems
Right.
like it should be.
We should add that.
We're-
Gen-
we're-
General,
Under programming,
I think right after mechanical system.
Academic
yeah.
I think the very next
Right at
thing
the
you
top of
need.
academic programs, we need some more general purpose classrooms, and we need one more science lab.
okay.
Building
You don't have to-
utilization.
You don't have to fix it tonight.
Just add in a line called
I
building
do have an empty
utilization, right?
space, I
Classroom
could put
utilization.
something in there.
Okay.
All right, so, so classroom,
General purpose classrooms.
all right, and what do you want to say?
To deal with overpopulation.
Lower utilization. I don't know.
Yeah. Lower utilization.
Is that critical, you said?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's an accreditation issue.
Good catch.
Same with the science lab.
I have that, the science lab.
That it's overcrowded?
No, I have critical. Classroom
But-
size.
But that's
It says classroom size.
classroom size,
Yeah.
right. That's saying that the ones we have are too small.
Right.
We need to make it that we
need a
need
new
one
one.
more.
Okay,
But wouldn't that, I would stick that, yeah.
need additional.
Yeah.
Let's
That is-
thank you.
Okay.
Then we move on to the future.
Okay, so, are you?
All right, we
all
on the
set?
future? I'm
Yeah.
all set.
Let's go to future, which is the third page. Specialized science, I think we just addressed that by adding another line item, saying we need another lab.
Well, this is also talking about what Harry was mentioning earlier about looking into the future. So some of those things are addressed here.
Yep.
And I sent this list to Perry so he can add in the other things. But I think that's another discussion to have, because this, if we're looking at the future, this is stuff we want that we don't currently have.
Right.
And so we talk about needing to improve the building because of space enrollment. And a few meetings back, we sort of touched upon changing the building, building a building, whatever, to address changes in programming.
Right.
And so that's what I see here.
Right.
Is it critical to the health and safety? No, it's important if you want to build your programming,
Well,
broaden the things you can offer for kids. That's just my opinion.
Right, under the umbrella of future, the science piece is critical, whereas the early education piece is desirable.
Okay.
Yes. So I
Okay.
think as long as, on this page, as long as we're under the umbrella of the future,
Do you want to put specialized science as critical?
But the issues and the impact that's here are addressed by the line item we added for one more science lab.
Do we know that? I mean, when you look at, when I'm looking at some of the things that they want to do, and so these are specialized science courses. They're not part of the general required curriculum. So if you're offering them things that we don't know that would impact space, is whether or not they're semester courses or full-year courses, are they singleton courses? So as soon as you get into stuff like that, you're creating other scheduling and space issues. And that's what we don't know. Same thing with business. I think we all agree that that's desirable to increase the business program. But again, we're talking about if you're adding things, you may be adding general purpose classrooms, but we don't know what those space needs would be if you're increasing your program. Perry talked about some other things. You need a television studio that specializes in that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, let's start with the labs and the business.
Okay.
But if we, we didn't say how many general purpose classrooms, but we're up around 10 or something like that. I think based on the piece of paper you handed out earlier tonight. Right, 10 or 11 general purpose classrooms to get down to 85% utilization.
No, it wasn't that many. It was
3 or 4.
It was 3 or 4 general use classrooms and 1 science classroom, assuming you leave the studies the way they are.
Right, but if you want to get people out of the class, out of the study halls,
Yes, then you start to increase it even.
then you're up to 10 classrooms or thereabouts. And some of those classrooms would remain studies, some of them would be business classes, which people who are now taking study would prefer to take. My understanding of the science lab is that if Perry had one more science lab, he could expand the curriculum and still keep utilization at around 85%. No?
If I'm substituting classes, one for something else, yes, but if I'm now creating additional sections, which means additional head count, then I need more space for that.
Right. You talk.
And do you have the student demand to increase the head count?
I mean, if you look at, look at,
we're tight, for instance, we could have used another section of anatomy and physiology.
I mean,
No, I understand that, but if you had one more lab, one more really decked out lab,
if I get one more lab, I think that brings my science classroom utilization to just below 85%.
okay.
If I add more sections of science, then that's going to start to bring it back up.
Okay.
So, I mean, maybe, I don't, you know, you had a classroom that's now 7 sections, you add 1 or 2 other sections, you're probably still somewhere, you know, I mean, I think you're still sub 90% in that situation, maybe 86, 87%, I'm making those numbers up, but that's
Okay.
probably not too far off. But,
Okay.
so it all depends on, are you increasing the offerings and students are taking that instead of, I mean, for example, epidemiology. A lot of students are taking epidemiology instead of anatomy and physiology. So I didn't add sections, but I increased the offerings.
But more wanted it than we could teach.
But
I'd
I'm
take
saying
them.
no to some kids, you can't take that, so then they have to either find something else or they're not going to take a second science class.
Okay.
So if I had more, they would probably come.
So it
Okay.
could be an additional class, but it would depend on what the offering is and how many sections and
Right.
all that.
Right, could we see forensics get bigger and then want, you know, more kids want to double in science senior year and take forensics as their academic elective? Yes.
But where I'm stuck on this argument is assuming a static student population.
Yeah,
And what you're doing is changing the curriculum. And you now have, imagine that you have 1 more science lab and you have 10 more general purpose classrooms. With a static student population, why do you need more classrooms if you're offering more sections? Because where are the kids coming from? You've overall, in terms of, I guess where I, you know, in terms of the total school, all 4 grades, all students, there's only a total number of sections that you can have.
so maybe you need 9 general classrooms and 2 science labs when you're just
You
dealing
know,
with.
but you see where I'm
Yep,
stuck conceptually? I mean, you're
But there's
It-
also that kind of goes, when you have some of these special offerings, you're not going to have a full capacity 22 to 24 students in a class. So if you've got a bunch of one-off or additional sections where you've only got 13 or 14, then you're spreading those same students out
Yeah.
over more spaces, because you can't have 2 12-person classes in one room that holds 25 people.
I agree, and I guess that's what the kind of projection I was looking for when we asked about what curriculum changes are going to drive space needs. You know, is it more than 10 classrooms, general purpose classrooms, or is it instead of 10 general purpose in 1 lab, is it 9 general purpose in 2 labs, or is it 10 general purpose in 2 labs? You know, I'm not going to argue of the value of those classes. I just feel that this committee has to go through this process having a defensible recommendation, a defensible vision of how much additional space we need, assuming a flat student population.
So if you have a flat student population, you can change science offerings and be classroom space neutral, assuming that the new offerings can make use of existing space. As an example, I mean, forensics is an example. We didn't used to offer a forensics class, now we offer a forensics class. So students who might have taken something else are now taking forensics, or students who might not have taken an extra science are now taking forensics instead of something, an elective that they might have taken. So you can change the science offerings if the population remains stable and be relatively classroom neutral, but it's harder to make it work from a scheduling standpoint because of the high utilization rate of the current science classrooms. If you add an additional science classroom, it gives you more breather to get more kids into the classes that they want, which I guess can conceivably make it a little bit easy. That could have a somewhat of a positive domino effect as far as creating some different offerings, because you can get more kids into the classes they want, which gives you a little more flexibility to offer some different stuff. But I think expanding offerings with stable student population can be classroom neutral, or it cannot. if you expand offerings, stable student population, and kids say, oh, I'm going to take this science class instead of this business class, then now you're driving more kids into the science classrooms from
If you got a big shift in mix, then yeah, that could happen, but do you foresee a big shift in mix? I mean, there's no way to forecast that shift in mix.
Yep, sorry.
Right. Who would have, I would not have predicted we'd have the number of kids doubling in math that we have, except that we got a faculty on who built an AP Stats program that's been very, very popular.
Okay.
So we have what I consider to be huge numbers of kids doubling in math senior year.
Okay.
So taking the contrary point of view, you can't forecast it, but if you perhaps don't have it, then you're unable to
Right.
consider the possibility of
And shouldn't we be
some
looking
things.
STEM?
And
Is that-
and
is that an
again,
accurate
getting,
way to
you know,
see it?
getting back to
You can't build it, right?
the definition of critical here, how speculative are you,
We need one more.
how much speculation are you going to let drive the project?
But this is under future, right? We're under a future section, so we are looking out a little bit.
Okay.
So it could overlap with other things we talked about, and it could be covered, but it might not be covered. So I don't know, for me at this point, whether, you know, whether that could be a critical space, but once it all kind of, you know, you go back to it for the second time, you know, or the third time or whatever, how that all interrelates may change what the overall recommendation is moving forward. But if you take it at its face value, and you're talking about future, you know,
Then you've got two different grades of critical, right?
Yeah.
You've got critical now and critical future.
Yep.
Yes.
And do you want to go forward with that distinction?
One of the things we could, and I don't know that it has to be discussed now, but one of the things we can think about is creating flex space. So in other words, we might only need, based on what we're looking at, is one lab that's truly decked out as a science lab, chem lab, hood, everything. But then, because of what we're talking about here and understanding that really trying to get so definitive that we need, 3 labs, 2 labs, whatever, you build 2 additional classrooms, 2 out of the 10 that we've just kind of talked about, with added amenities that make them available to science. Like you create wet space, so you have 3 sinks in each of those rooms. Additional kinds of storage.
At least put the plumbing in.
You put, or at least put the plumbing in, or you do something. We did this sort of at Century School. We built 2 identical art rooms, knowing that maybe at some point, given the size of the school, we'd need them. But we also had an eye towards they could also be used as a science lab for the school because we had an existing science lab. So, I think we can be creative a little bit, maybe on a couple of the rooms and make them available to other kinds of classes, not the generic 4-wall classrooms.
I guess if you really look at the future things, I guess it might be hard to call something critical with our original definitions.
That's, I mean, with this definition of critical, I don't see anything on this list that I agree says critical. Important, sure. But with the definition of critical we have here, I guess it's hard for me to say that any of these meet that health, safety, legal accreditation definition.
Okay. Anybody want to argue with that? No? Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I just wanted to add about the science piece. I think that we might need more information in order to make determinations about what kinds of science spaces you might need, thinking about future courses. So thinking about what differentiates a general science lab from a really specialized one that has to, it can only be used by certain kinds of places. So to me, there's not quite enough information to make a determination about the kinds of science labs that are there.
Okay.
But I do think it's important in the conversation, though, to have a future umbrella. If nothing
Yeah.
changes and our kids are still in the foyer for study hall, we still need to fix the roof, right? We
Yeah.
still, that's the critical must-have done.
Right.
But if we're looking at what we think education should be in this district, that's kind of what the future is.
Right.
Right.
And within that future, it's not population dependent, it's what the curriculum
Right.
should be.
Right.
Right, even if we never add another student, these are still things that we would want to have in spaces we would want to have.
Exactly.
And
Right.
thus, critical takes on a different meaning in this, under the future umbrella.
Right.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
more of a priority, a
Right.
highest
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
priority.
Right, yeah.
Maybe we come up with a fifth, you know,
Rating.
a fifth rating or something like that to say that this is, it isn't in place now, but this is what we think we should be doing, kind of thing.
Slightly
Okay.
related to that, I wonder, going back to Harry's
Can't do that right now.
memo, where he neglects to talk about study rooms, and I wonder if it's desirable for that, his memo to include that as part of his discussion. I don't think it's particularly mentioned.
I have the numbers, I can easily put them in.
Just does drive up the general classroom and some of those other things, depending on, you know, if that's something.
Yeah, I mean, I ran the numbers.
Right.
I could easily add that in too, if that would be helpful.
Personally, I think it is. I think that study halls are kind of meant to be not halls, but rooms. And it's a critical need that it,
I think it's an aspect of the discussion that probably should be incorporated.
and
Yep.
when you talk about accreditation and safety and all that stuff, I think that
Supervision.
the supervision piece is critical, and I think that, I know you and I don't always agree.
It doesn't mean my definition of critical, but.
If we got the general
It is critical.
curriculum use of classrooms down to 85%, you're going to have extra spaces that you're going to be able to plug direct
question.
studies into. So it's not.
But the need to address the current studies is critical.
Yes. They
Right.
shouldn't be in the hallway.
They should not be.
They
in the
shouldn't be in the
hallway.
hallway, they're overrunning the media center right now, the
Yeah.
media
Yeah.
center is.
That's probably actually, I think, the bigger issue
Yeah.
is the media center, because then
Okay.
kids and teachers can't
I would
use
say
it.
important but critical.
Television's on.
Moving on. So we've gone through the list, we've identified the critical issues. Our next meeting, we should go through, and first see if we agree on what the definition of important is, and address those items, go through the list the same way. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 10th, if I recall correctly.
It's a Thursday.
It's a Thursday. I don't know if anybody wants to have a meeting between now and then, specifically to go through the important stuff.
Next week, the week after is Thanksgiving.
Right. It got complicated.
Mm. So you said December 10th, is that, yeah, that's our next meeting? Of what?
School, it's your, December, it's your school committee
School-
people that
school
have.
com-
probably
School
the more
committee
stuff.
meeting is the December 2nd.
I get my hair cut on the first, that's
Oh, let me put that in my calendar.
Massage everything, so that's out.
It's way past my bedtime.
And not my
I'm excited.
shoulders.
Does anybody want to meet before December 10th? I don't hear anybody clamoring for it, so.
I vote no.
Okay, all right. So our next meeting will be December 10th. Let me ask now, however, does anybody want to meet between, when do we want to have a meeting after December 10th?
Can I ask this question? I mean, kind of, what is the timing, the sequence, or the window of opportunity with the state of passing in that?
It opens in January and it goes to March 15th or something like that. March
The
30th.
only gotcha on that is, we can't authorize
Right, it's
the
gonna
superintendent to do that. It has to go through
The school committee.
The school committee.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
right? So when is the school committee meeting in December and January?
Should we start earlier?
We meet all the
10th?
time. We have,
a
in
long
January,
meeting.
we have a meeting on January, wait, so I said December
This-
2nd, December 16th, January
And-
13th, and 27th. Do you need more than that?
When's your last meeting in December?
December 16th.
Day before.
Uh,
No, it's a week.
No, it's the
after,
week,
yeah.
it's
This
the week after we meet.
Yep.
Could the whole demographic?
You have a draft of an SOI application already written though, don't you?
Well,
You had one last year, I thought.
we put one in for this,
We meet twice.
for the,
We meet on the 8th and the 10th.
science lab, so, I mean, it's not gonna be difficult to get one going.
I guess my concern is, after 2 years of this, I don't want to make it 3.
I know.
I
know,
agree.
I'm kind of-
What if we meet on the
We need a
8th
light at the
and
end
the
of the
10th
tunnel.
that week? She's gonna hit me.
If I had the strength, I would.
How about the week?
Lift my arm.
I have a question about the demographic study. Will it be desirable for that to be brought to this group sooner rather than later? And maybe we should meet the first week in December as well, just to push that along?
I think the difference between the first week in December and the second week in December, as far as that concerned, is immaterial,
Right.
because we're not going to get any results for 4 months anyway.
Right, so I'm just sort of hinting at taking the opportunity to push that along and then also talk about
Yeah.
all the other things that we know we need to talk about.
Right.
Because really, at some point, it's regarding that statement of interest, kind of whatever, but it's also, kind of getting all the stuff in front of the school committee and the general.
What's that date that we're working off of? What's the end date we have in mind here, Michael or Bob, in terms
Well-
of, or, I don't know.
I think the SOI invitations opens about the 15th of January,
Yeah.
So,
and it goes for 4 weeks, 4 or 6
And the
weeks.
school committee would need to discuss that several times before.
Possibly.
Well, they only,
to-
I mean, I think it's a relatively quick conversation to discuss whether or not we fill it out. The question really becomes sort of at the other end when you're submitting it, getting into the details of understanding what you're committing to when you submit,
Right.
and-
When you
and
submit the SOI?
Right, because once you submit, you're then in the queue to possibly be selected.
Right.
And so there are various times to sort of get out, but if you're gonna submit and the committee is not fully supportive of being selected, I think they need to vet that and make
so
sure they're.
Yeah.
you need to know what you're submitting for, roughly.
The MSBA
Well, again, the
was-
No.
statement is just
No.
describing what our needs are, so it's much of the
Okay.
dialogue we've already had, it's
No.
not
No,
describing a project.
we have way more detail than any of the SOI. I've read about half a dozen SOIs.
Yeah.
And we have way more detail than anybody else submits. It's all 40,000 foot.
Yeah.
Okay, so then if
The-
we
the
figure
issue
the middle of
is-
your window is February 1st, we're working backwards from February 1st.
Right.
How long does the school committee need?
Well, the school committee has, after our December 10th meeting, there's, I think, 3 school committee meetings between there and January 15th. So if we make a recommendation on the 10th, the school committee can consider it on the 16th or start considering on the 16th. Otherwise, when else do you want to meet in December?
So what work is before us before we make a recommendation to the school committee? Is 2 hours on the 10th sufficient to accomplish what we need to accomplish?
I don't think we're going to finish all of these recommendations and prioritizing them by the end of December. And I think we need to make a recommendation to the school committee by the end of December. So I would say that by the end of December, we may have to decouple the recommendation about any recommendation about an SOI from the final report.
So we can keep moving and working forward on details while potentially recommending to the school committee, we think we've learned enough to recommend to you that you.
There's a need to do
Statement of
something,
interest.
what the exact
So
something
then
is.
if we look at our criticals now and say,
The criticals are not going to go in the SOI.
no, but looking at them just to say, yes, this is enough to say we're recommending to the school committee, you do the SOI.
Well, we've also submitted multiple documents to the school committee
Right.
already, right?
Right.
Indicating a lot of information you need.
Right. So, yes. So the issue is, let's, for the sake of argument, say that Michael needs authorization from the school committee by January 15th
Yeah.
to submit by mid-February. The school committee is going to need a couple of weeks, a couple of meetings to discuss this. So and your meeting, when's your last meeting in December, on the 16th?
Yes.
All right. So,
When's the next meeting?
What do you want us to do, Bob?
Next meeting is the 18th of November.
Should the school committee kind of have made up their mind on this before we hit the budget season as well? Or does that not matter?
it doesn't matter. It's just,
Yeah.
in terms of the
The
agenda.
window will close before the budget season really hits us.
Right.
Okay.
I
I
we
think the
should,
discussion at the school committee will be, there's an implied commitment, as described on the MSBA website, that the school committee that's submitting believes they can get the support of their municipality or municipalities within 2 years. So that's kind of a raising their hand, yes, we think we have our towns behind us kind of question, and I think that's the real conversation at the school committee.
So there's no cost associated with anything moving forward.
not with the SOI. The step after the SOI, that's big bucks. That's the feasibility study. That's big bucks.
No, so
And that's
we-
where you want the backing of your towns, of course.
So if their next meeting's on the 18th, do we need to kind of?
16. We need to,
16th.
we need to.
Wait, the next, you asked about the next meeting
Next
is
meeting.
November 18th.
November
The
18th?
last
Oh,
meeting
okay.
in December
And
is
just kind
December
of giving
16th.
a request or, giving them, putting it on their docket that, hey, we think we are looking at
Okay.
moving forward with some, I mean, I don't know what it seems that they need some time to kind of hash things
Well,
Digest a
out.
little bit.
How about if we say that at our December 10th meeting, we will recommend or not going forward with an SOI? And we'll take that message to the school committee, that on our December 10th meeting, that's when we intend to vote on it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay?
I think that's good, yeah.
Is everybody comfortable with voting on that at the next meeting?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if my vote's gonna change any from right now till the next meeting, but
So I think it's desirable to have information and documents to hand saying this is why. And this is the sound basis that you can use to talk to your
Yeah.
leadership in your towns about this big decision. So that's kind of the thing, the leverage that you really want to be able to give to the school committee.
So, I guess, so the 10th we make a decision, and, obviously the school committee will know informally before then, but I guess we'll get on the agenda for the December 16th meeting, if we can, in order to explain why.
and I guess the question is, do we need more than the December 10th meeting to kind of wrap up what we want to pass on to the school committee?
Right.
Yeah, how
That's my
much do
question.
you all need on the 16th? Do you need a big honkin' document that says, here's all the reasons why we recommend X, Y, and Z? Do you need a?
So what are you asking the school committee for? To support a statement of interest?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah, what do
the
you
school
think
committee will be
needs
asked to authorize the superintendent to submit a statement of interest, and it will be in very specific language provided by the MSBA.
So will you have the statement of interest by December 16th or not?
No.
So it's
No.
just authorizing
It's
based
just
on the work that's been done and what we see as critical needs. And if there's information, I would imagine, from the MSBA about what the statement of interest entails, what other information do you think they would need?
The school committee?
Yes.
I think persuasive information to bring to their towns to see if they feel like they have the support they might need in the coming 2 years to step in for that commitment.
Things like Perry's letter that kind of goes through utilization, and we're missing this many classrooms or this, that, I think those are the types of things.
I think this would be a great document.
This would be great.
able
You know,
to
we've got
hand
backup information on the website.
I think whatever you give has to be concise and spare.
Yep.
Right.
I don't personally want to meet more, but I think
Pictures
that
and
meeting
numbers.
December 10th alone isn't enough to kind of wrap up things, to kind of get it done, to pass on to the school committee. I mean, that's just my...
What if we just had a little work group that worked on a 2-page executive summary?
And then brought that
Yeah,
to
I
the
think
December
that's a good
10th
idea,
meeting.
Mike, to have an
Yeah.
executive summary.
Okay.
And we've gone through and we've isolated up front what the critical needs are.
Yeah.
Right. So
And
we
I
can
think
bullet
that's a
those.
piece of it, that are the drivers.
Yeah, I
We
think
need
that,
to-
if that doesn't sell the school committee, telling them the important stuff and the desirable stuff's not gonna make a difference.
Correct.
So also have your other summaries that you've done
Right.
Right.
to draw from, to sort of support whatever you want to support.
So the audiences that I care about, my selectmen, say, what do you need, and why do you think that's a good idea to have? And so that's where the detail work that we're doing, we'll just say, here, you can read this and talk, ask me about it. But I
Well,
feel like that's really important
for-
for some of the audiences of the school committee to see that.
In order to keep good graces with your school committee, I mean, your selectmen rather, because I know this is an issue with our selectmen in Bolton. You know, I think one of the things we need to be upfront with about is, after you submit the SOI, you have to be accepted. And that takes 3-4 months?
So we submit somewhere in late March, and they're usually out by May, early June.
All right, so you're invited to submit a feasibility study, you know, in May. You get a letter saying, now, you have 270 days to respond to that invitation. That doesn't give anybody time to wait for their town meeting. So there's going to need to be a special town meeting in all of the towns to do this. And none of the selectmen like being surprised by that stuff. But that's a time frame that the MSBA sets, not this group, not the administration.
Well, I think it's an important piece of that executive summary is just, here's the outline and timing of,
Right.
you know,
The
how
steps.
things go. We
Right.
don't get to set it, this is the, you know.
As a finance committee member, I don't like financial decisions brought to the town in isolation from the overall budget, as a former finance committee member.
Yeah.
But there's no other way around it with this. And we need we need to let people know about that now, otherwise they're gonna think we knew about it all along and we're trying to rig the system.
Well, even just explaining it, the feasibility study is an incurred cost, and it's not an insignificant cost, but, you know, the next step is
Right.
where money's spent.
But that's not a cost to the town, that's a cost to the school
It's
district.
cost of the district, right? One thing we
But
might
some
be,
school districts borrow to
depending on the cost. of the
finance, to finance it, and that will go back to the towns.
One thing we could think about, Bob, is that we do some sort of presentation at annual town meeting about where we are,
Okay,
and that if, you know, that we did submit, if that's what the board decides to do, and that the next steps would be the feasibility study. And that way, you know, we're getting them before the summer,
right.
and then when they come back, you know,
I'm happy doing that, you know, if the selectmen want that. I would just say, you know, I've given the presentations in the past, I'm happy to do it again, but I know Bolton and Lancaster's town meetings are on the same night at the same time.
right,
And I can't be at both, all right, so
Yeah.
I can't be at both of them. So someone's gonna have to make
Yeah.
the presentation to the Lancaster meeting, and someone's gonna have to make the presentation to the Stowe meeting. but,
To put in the hopper.
so I don't know that we need 2 meetings to discuss the SOI.
No, to me, it's not the SOI. I mean,
It's
I could
the
vote
package-
tonight
it's
for
the package
SOI
for the
as far as I'm
supporting
concerned.
package.
It's the package for the school committee?
That's why are we giving it to the
It's the
school
support.
committee?
You're gonna do that with a smaller
To
group?
the school committee and
Yeah,
a
you
larger
want me to
audience.
work on that and, with a couple of people and present that back on the 10th?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay. All right. There's minutes that we should review. Not tonight, but let me hand them out.
Thank you.
Okay. And we can look at these at the next meeting. So next meeting will be,
December 10th, yeah.
yeah, December 10th. It will be a vote on
It's all coming back to me now.
statement of interest and the next level of categorizing these items.
And by then, would we have that two-page feature drafted? So maybe to review that.
Yeah, and we'll review that. Okay.
Very good.
Anybody want to move to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
meeting.
you, Bob.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you, everybody.
Thank you.